The final stage on our guide takes us to Weobley Castle, which commands the Lough Estuary on the North Gower coast. Weobley Castle, like Pennard and Penrice, is very well sited for its main purpose, the defence of the fief of Weobley. For its northern side, in particular, is protected by the formidable barrier of the marshes of the estuary and the steep rising ground that leads to the castle. The east was never fortified, perhaps recognition of its natural strength, while the west afforded the most practicable approach to the castle. It is believed that work on Weobley began around 1304, when the de la Beers were lords of Gower, and much of what can be seen today can be attributed to two contiguous phases of building commencing at this time. Again, however, there is a school of thought that justifiably questions this initial date. Indeed, this thick-walled square tower exhibits characteristics that would suggest that it was constructed in the mid-1200s, significantly predating what had been assumed to be the principal construction date of Weobley Castle. The first buildings, built in the early 14th century, were the Great Hall and the West Wing, which provided private rooms for the lord of the manor. Technically, it is worth mentioning that Weobley, like Oxwich, is not really a castle, but a fortified manor house. Security and space for a small garrison was provided to a certain extent, but its domestic arrangements, more prominent than the defensive works, would suggest that the castle's principal use would be an abode, albeit defensive and strong. Nevertheless, although David de la Beer, first builder of the castle, did begin construction in an era of peace, he was aware of the need for self-protection features. Evidence of this is provided, for example, by the crenellated wall tops, the watchtower, and the construction of the southwest tower to battlement level. Further investigation would also ascertain that the design of the castle would, before completion of the southwest towers, undergo a radical alteration to incorporate militaristic defensive features. Indeed, the original plan provided no defence of the south and west approaches, and this discrepancy was what probably motivated the castle's designers to rethink the layout. The second phase in Weobley's construction was marked by a more economical approach to building, the defence of the castle having less prominence than previously had been the case. A number of buildings were added in this phase, including the gateway, the octagonal turret, and the chapel, which turned out to be the least expensive way of enclosing the site, while at the same time maximising the accommodation available. Minor modifications and updates were regularly made throughout the 14th century, but it wasn't until the late 15th century that any significant addition was made. At this time, Rhys ap Thomas, a controversial character who had betrayed the traditional family loyalties and served the House of York during the Wars of the Roses, was owner of the castle. He added the porch block, a comparatively elaborate addition to the castle, to provide a more grandiose entrance to the hall and the private quarters. After Rhys ap Thomas, the house became first in the possession of the Herberts and then the Mansells. It was also called into action as a military outpost. In 1403, Owain Glyndwr's forces attacked Weobley and caused extensive damage to the structure. Fortunately, the damage was repaired and the castle continued in its role. Like Penrice and Oxwich, Weobley would become a tenant farmhouse, and one of the last additions to the castle was this chimney, built by the then occupants in the 16th century. Today, run by Cadw as a tourist attraction, the castle houses an exhibition that tells the story of Weobley and many of the other ancient sites in Gower.